Hi, welcome to Tonkocast number 18.
So today's guests are?
Tiny Inventions.
That's right.
They're a studio out in Baltimore, Maryland, made up of two amazing people, Max Porter and Rue Kuwahata.
That's right. So we saw their film for the first time about 3 years ago when The Dam Keeper was going around the festivals, and at the Austin Film Festival they won the best animation prize, and we got some sort of a honorable runner-up mention. But their film was Between Times, and that was really amazing. So we kind of fell in love with their technique. They kind of do hybrid of analog and digital, really incredible filmmaking technique and storytelling.
Yeah, I think they've been a big inspiration for us because they're out there. We thought we were far away from Hollywood here in San Francisco, but they're in Baltimore doing their own thing, making amazing films. And everything they do has just such love and care in every single little frame and prop and character. And their latest film is called Negative Space.
That's right. It is incredible. We got to watch it, and we actually watched it many, many times afterwards. And so their latest film is actually full-on stop motion, and it won awards left and right, everywhere in different festivals.
And it's actually a production of a.k.a. Films and
Manual Cam Studios. So they are going around the festivals around the world, and also it's up for the Oscars. So, you know, we thought it would be great to kind of let everybody know about this film because it's one of the most amazing short films we've seen.
yeah, here's our conversation with Rue and Max.
Okay, Rue and Max, we'd love to start with asking about you guys individually. Just give us your background, where you guys come from, and how you guys got into filmmaking, animation. Maybe Rue, you can start.
Sure. So I'm born and raised in Japan, but I lived in the U.S. Several years when I was little, and also came back to U.S. for high school. So it's kind of like a ping pong. I kind of went back and forth between the U.S. and Japan. And when I was 19, I went to Parsons School of Design in New York, and I studied illustration and animation. So that's where I fell in love with animation, because I realized that two things I love could be combined, which is crafting and storytelling, because I was a huge fan of comics. I had so many comics, so animation was like an extension of that. So that's where I studied animation and fell in love, and since then I'm still in love with animation.
It's great. It's great.
And I'm originally from New York, and you know, I started like most people drawing, and that's my background. But when I was about 12 or 13, I discovered photography, and that became my big passion. So I actually went to school thinking that I was going to major in photography and become a photographer. But somehow I found my way to live action filmmaking while I was at the Rhode Island School of Design. And I loved telling stories, and I loved cinematic language. I loved combining shots to create different moods and tell the story. But I hated working with actors, and I hated that process. It just felt like I wanted a little bit more control. So for me, animation satisfied that. It allowed me to tell the stories that I wanted to tell and have control over the acting.
So we met at the studio in New York. We were working on commercials and pilot for TV series, and I was sitting like a couple feet away from Max, but I could see his back, but he couldn't see me. And I sort of observed him every day for a long time, like over a month. And I had this like a secret crush on him because I just loved the way he was animating, which is like he just never took a break, and he was super committed. And I thought that was so wonderful.
That's awesome.
So you like me because I'm a workaholic?
Yeah.
Wait, both of you were animators? Is that how you got
I was
into?
I was staff at this company, and I would animate or I would design or composite. I was sort of a jack of all hands there,
Got it.
And
and
I was a freelance who came in for a few months as a designer.
Nice.
That's
Nice,
cool.
nice.
and then and then Rue asked me out, and I cooked her dinner, and I
Wow.
made her chicken and couscous and potatoes, and the first thing she said to me was, "Wow, everything that you made for me is white. There's no green." And
But like I
That's
also
awesome.
I have to interrupt. The flavor was only salt.
yes,
Like it wasn't like a sauce or cream or anything. It was just salt.
I'm not a good cook,
No.
but I thought it was charming and refreshing to have someone who just said exactly what they meant, and it was
amazing.
like just
Oh,
honest.
Nice.
So
Nice.
yeah, so that was how we met.
And then you guys, is that when you guys decided to form this duo, Tiny Inventions, or did you guys work together for a while before that, or how did Tiny Inventions get started?
Yeah, so actually we were dating for a bit and then we got married. And then it's really a couple months after we got married, we were talking like, hey, why don't we start our own thing? Like maybe we should try working together because we worked on projects together but in different studios, so it wasn't like it was a collaboration among many people and we never worked just like him and I. So we wanted to try and see how things would go and see if we could like make it in this industry.
And a lot of the work that was being done in New York at the time was Flash, and it was really cost effective and limited, and it wasn't. I mean, we learned a lot by doing it, but it wasn't really our taste. And so we were, a newly married couple, and we were trying to figure out who we were as a couple, and figured that we could also figure out who we were as artists together, and start that journey. So
Wow.
that was really how it started.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And may I ask, as you guys started the studio and started working together, and I mean, you guys decided after you were married to do that, was that
Yeah.
all smooth? Kind of that starting to work together and find out. I mean, you guys are, married, and hey, let's work together. And I mean, I love my wife, but we don't necessarily work together.
Yeah.
How
Well,
was that?
I think when I met Max, I really felt like we were from the same universe. Although we were born and raised in different countries, and we took different paths, we really liked similar things. And after we watch movie or go to museums, the discussions were really fun and interesting. So I thought we could work well together. And at the same time, there was definitely a fear like, okay, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to lose my career and my marriage and everything's a disaster. But if everything works out, that's like the most romantic thing and that's like the best thing that can happen. So it was definitely a gamble.
Yeah. But I think we didn't have much expectations. It started very naturally. We started with a small project, and we really built from there. So it's not like we went all in and started a company and invested money and invested resources to a company. We like did it in a very slow incremental
Well,
project.
we didn't have anything to invest anyways.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So maybe it was the youth.
Yeah.
You know, when you're young, you don't really think so much and you just do it. Maybe that's how it worked for us.
That's awesome. And you guys are based out of Baltimore.
Yes.
Right. So we were living in the Netherlands 2011
To 12.
to 2012 while we were working on Between Times. And we were at an arts organization called the Netherlands Institute for Animation Film. And around the time we went there to work on our project, the EU economic crisis hit and the organization folded. So we were trying to figure out what to do next. And I had taught part-time at Parsons, the New School for Design, and I love teaching. So I found a full-time teaching position at the Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore. So I applied for the job and I got it. So that was how we ended up in Baltimore, and we've been here this is our 6th year now.
Yep.
I see. So tell us, I think a lot of people would be super interested in hearing like your unique process. I mean, you guys have such a distinct feel with your technique and storytelling style, and especially the way you bring kind of analog and digital combination, which we kind of feeling wise, I think Tonko strives, at least tries to strive for. But we're so impressed with the way you guys kind of bring best of both worlds, and seems like a lot of the projects before Negative Space, you did a lot of that on your own, just two of you, and just tell us a little bit, if you could talk about how you approach your films and techniques.
Right. So I guess we started combining analog and digital techniques because of space considerations. We were living in a small apartment in Brooklyn for a while, and we would build a set, we would photograph it, but we didn't have enough space to really animate stop motion. So we started to figure out a way to achieve a similar feel, but using the space that we had. So we started to combine digital and analog techniques, and we sort of fell in love with that process because it felt like something that didn't exist before. Like pulling digital pieces together sort of created something new, and it engaged parts of us, like different things that we were interested in. Like we were interested in the computer, we were interested in materials, and it allowed us to work with both.
Yeah, it's like, let's put everything in the pot and see what happens.
Right. And part of the challenge was like seeing if we could pull it all together. So we looked at the computer as almost like the ultimate collage tool. Like you pull real footage, you pull digital pieces together, and you use the computer to put them together in a way that feels like it's part of the same universe.
I see. Cool. Yeah.
That's so cool. And you guys, the aesthetic of your films is really beautiful and poetic and kind of, handmade. The feeling of an artist making all of these parts and pieces is just it's such a great feeling in contrast to so much of the way people consume the kinds of animation that people consume on a wider scale these days is the kind of slick CG look. You guys have such a beautiful aesthetic. How do you guys work in combination to create that aesthetic? Is one of you kind of designing, and the other, how do you guys split responsibilities, and how does it result in the final product, I guess?
Okay. So making things like crafting or set building, character design, things like that is my responsibility. And Max is the one who photographs, lights, and puts it together. So even in the design stage, we still work together, but we have like a split responsibilities.
Right.
And my biggest influence is Dice. I'm pretty sure you know this show, Dekiru Kana. It's by this tall mime artist Noppo-san and his assistant Ugo Ugo-kun, and it's like educational channel, and it's 15 minutes, and they make stuff like objects and toys out of recycling materials like cardboard, paper, plastic containers, chopsticks, and that was so magical to me. So I would watch it every day, every morning for 15 minutes, and then I would spend like almost all day crafting something similar to what they made, but take off and do something quite bizarre and maybe not so like comprehensible. So using all these materials was kind of a natural process for me. And then also combining with fabric, which I have a huge influence from my grandma, who was sewing all the time. So it's just kind of hodgepodge once again and putting things together. And then for you, Max, the photo part.
Yeah, and then for me, I think that so much of the emotion of an image comes from the light. and you can take a material like cardboard, and depending on how you light it, depending on the color, depending on the tint, it could be poetic, it could be it could feel like it's in the preschool universe. So we spend a lot of time thinking about how the lighting impacts the emotional reaction from the person who's watching our projects.
And we also have this we call it like mashed potato, and a friend of ours mentioned it once, and we basically stick to it. But he said that when you make homemade mashed potatoes, you have to consciously keep the chunk of potatoes. If you mash them too nicely, it looks like store-bought. And we're like, that's a perfect analogy. So we make a conscious effort to keep the mistake or keep certain parts rough to tell people, hey, it's handmade. It's not all slick and all computer.
And that'll be like a code that Rue and I use. Like if it's feeling too slick or we overworked, we'll be like, oh, it's like store-bought mashed potatoes.
Yeah, come on, bring it back to homemade mashed potatoes.
That's awesome.
That's really awesome. I think that's something all of us in animation, especially these days, especially in CG, can learn from, that sort of feeling of tactile.
Yeah, handmade. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in the end, like I think all of us are trying to tell human stories, and if you don't feel that there's a human behind it, then it's hard to make that direct connection.
Yeah, that's such a
Totally.
That's awesome. Yeah, you know, when we watched the film about time, and the clocks between times, and then, you know, we really loved that and the aesthetic of that and the feeling of that and the cinematography involved in that. But when we watched your new film, you know, it felt like an evolution from the previous film in so many ways, both aesthetically and
Ooh, thank you.
Even the story was just so wonderful. How do you guys, you know, we want to start to talk about your new film, but how do you guys feel about your new film in terms of how you guys have grown as filmmakers?
That's a big question. How do we grow as filmmakers?
Well, I think for us, that new film was a Negative Space is an exercise in economy, in being really confident and clear in some of the choices that we made, and not trying to do too much. So for us, I think we think it's successful because we didn't add more than we wanted to. And we worked with great people. I mean, we started with a poem that was, just floored us. Ron Corchi's poem "Negative Space" is the basis for the film. We worked with producers that believed in us, Nydia and Edwina and Jean-Louis. We worked with talented animators, talented set designers, cinematographers. So for us, it was also an evolution because we had to be very clear in our vision so that we could communicate it to the people that were working with us. So we feel really good about the project.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful.
We had a great opportunity to watch your film, and actually we watched it multiple times. It was such a beautiful film, and you know, obviously, like Robert was saying, it's quite a bit of an evolution from your last film, and mainly, you know, I think we read in another article that this was important for you guys to do it full on stop motion. That
Yes.
Definitely kind of it came through in the final product. And do you want to talk a little bit about like the experience of doing like full on stop motion compared to the hybrid that you guys have done in the past?
Sure. So because the film is about packing and it used a lot of texture and fabric, so we thought that there's no way we can ever do this digitally, and it needed to be the real fabric, and you could feel the wrinkle and you could feel the fold and just get that texture. So it wasn't even like a question of what the process would be. It was like, okay, this has to be stop motion. And because the clothings and objects are so lively, in contrast, we wanted to keep the puppets rather not stiff, but more minimum. and that was our goal. So yeah, from the beginning we knew it was stop motion, and we knew it was challenged because we've always combined digital and analog, and we're like, okay, how do we do this? But once again, we had really great, talented people to help us along the way.
Yeah, and I think there's also a feeling of authenticity that comes across when it is just one technique. And we felt that we might not be able to achieve that if we combine computer and analog techniques. Um, and just in the process of working in stop motion with animators, it felt very much like you were directing actors. Like we would go over scenes that we wanted to animate with the people who were working with us. They would go to their set, and we would always be kind of surprised with what came out, and that kept the process interesting and exciting for us.
But it was really hard at the beginning. I mean, like, when you're animating digitally, you could just go back to specific point and like, okay, the hand needs to raise like a little bit more. And you could just like work it over and over and make it like perfect,
Right.
exactly the way you want. But with stop motion, you can't go back. If you want to change it, it's the whole sequence. So part of us was like, okay, we have to prepare a lot more before the animator go into shooting and communicate every single stuff we wanted. And at the same time, kind of let go, let the animator just go with the flow and trust the animator. And that was a huge learning curve at the beginning. But at the end, we were like, this is better. This is awesome.
For sure. And I mean, there's something also about, most animators, most people who love animation love the control factor, and not being able to control everything, like looking at a shot and saying, okay, the big ideas are there, and that was refreshing, honestly.
That's great. Yeah, and I gotta say, even with a different kind of a process, you guys did definitely a full-on stop motion with a team of animators as opposed to just doing everything on your own. But still, you guys maintain the feeling of the signature kind of filmmaking style, the storytelling style. I mean, obviously, your design, Rue. And also, Max, the way you photograph, way you tell your story through camera and lighting, you guys definitely maintain the feeling of tiny inventions, so that's not lost, which is, I wish you guys continue to do that, because it's such a distinct style that we love, and it makes your story so much more effective.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's so nice.
Yeah. So for this film, in comparison to some of your older films, you talked a little bit about preparing a little bit more. What did that involve? Is that like design packets or samples or storyboards that were more fleshed out? How did you actually prepare differently for this film, given that you were going to be working with teams of artists?
Right. So probably the biggest difference was we did a lot more writing in the beginning. So because we were working within the French grant system, we were required to write artist statements and talk about our choices. So things that in the past we had done intuitively, we had to step back and say, okay, why is the sense of scale important? Why are we lighting it this way? What are the color choices that we're doing here? Why is the animation of the human characters different than the animation of the clothing? And it was awkward for us in the beginning to do such thorough research and investigation into our own intentions. But when we worked with the animators and the set designers and the cinematographers and our producers, we were able to better convey our intentions because we had done all of that work in the writing phase.
And we were used to writing for projects before it was realized, mostly for commercials. And that was mostly like how we're going to do it. We never really wrote about why. And that was a big step for us to figure it out. But I think we now liked it that for the projects we're developing now we're actually writing all the intentions and reasons first.
Right. And then on the technical side, because we didn't have any reshoots for the film, by the way, like every shot was the first take and we used it. So because we knew we didn't have much time to shoot the film, we did cardboard mock-ups of sets. We did like some CG pre-visualization of sets, and we did a lot of pre-vis work on it just to make sure that we were doing the right thing and making the right choices.
And before the animator went into the room, we had like a pretty detailed drawing of all the movements, the expressions, the type of movement we wanted, and we would discuss it for a while. And then when the animator did the blocking, we went back and then discussed further more. And after that, it was like, okay, it's all yours. You already know our intention. Now it's your turn to execute it.
And did you guys work remotely, or did you guys work kind of on set with everybody?
Oh yeah, so we moved to France for 9 months for the production, and it was actually funny because within those 9 months we had 4 different locations because we got grants from different places, so we had to move. So while we were making a film about packing, we were packing all the time too, both the sets and our belongings. So now we're professional packers.
It was research.
Yeah. What's the most efficient way to pack the sets?
That's amazing.
Yeah, so one of the place that we started, it's called Cyclic Animation Center, and it's sort of like a residency, but also like a production residency place. And there were maybe 3 to 6 teams, different projects going on at the same time. So that was like a really great way to start the project and make a lot of friends immediately, and also be inspired by other projects. And then from there, we moved to different locations for shooting. And then we ended up coming back to Cyclic for post-production. And again, we were surrounded by like 6 different projects. So although it was rather a small team, but then like the amount of people we met was pretty big.
That's awesome.
Hey, yeah, I think some people who listen to our podcast are also like aspiring or even existing indie filmmakers, and you guys have done kind of residencies, like between times you lived in Netherlands, and then for this movie you guys stayed in France and got grants from, I guess, French government or communities.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that process? I mean, that's something we're definitely not familiar with, and it's such a amazingly like inspiring process. Sounds like like living in foreign countries and making friends with different filmmakers, and can you tell us about that? Like, you guys are living such a dream indie filmmaker life, at least from outside.
I feel like you're romanticizing it more, and we're probably like romanticizing your life. For me, I guess, my father was a pilot for airline.
Oh, yeah.
So the fact that he was always all over the world, I had the sense that the world was large but small at the same time. So moving to different places never felt like a scary thing to me, but it was more like exciting thing to understand different cultures and to meet people and see how people live.
Yeah,
See.
For me, I never thought that I would live in another country. I was born in the United States, and until I met Rue, I really didn't think that it was possible. But she had this sort of passion to move places and to understand new cultures. So it became a priority in our lives to actively do that.
It's also like when we started making short films, it was such a struggle with finance to do commercials, save up a lot of money, and then nights and weekends make the short film, and then every time the short film was done, our bank account would go so low. And we always said, like, how is this sustainable? How long can we do this? And then we met a bunch of people in film festivals from Europe, and they were fundings. And so I thought, I want that too. Can we get that? And so we applied to the Netherlands Institute, and we got in, like, okay, this is possible. So when we started Negative Space, I thought, I'm gonna go to France too. I'm gonna see if this works, and it did. So I feel like there's so many people who are willing to help you in different stages, and it's just a matter of reaching out to people and asking, hey, like, is this possible? Can we do this? And it's really surprising and kind how nice people have been.
It's incredible.
That's so awesome. We're just
Yeah, that's really incredible. I think, like you said, a lot of people don't know about it, and it's interesting how those kind of support for art and films seem a little more available in Europe.
Yeah.
I wish it was like that in the States too, but maybe we just don't know. But it seems like there's so many kind of struggling indie filmmakers kind of, waiting for that kind of stuff, the government support, for arts. But yeah, and it's actually amazing that you guys got to spend time in France to make this film with the French animators, and yeah, it's and the result shows. It definitely shows how fun and inspired you guys were when you were making this. It definitely comes through. It's really amazing work.
Yeah, the kind of, the in the film, I think not, hopefully not giving anything away, but the way that you guys abstractly kind of go into the luggage and the waves of clothes and the little watch crab and all of those things, are those things that from the very beginning were there? What for us, and like, I imagine stop motion similar. We work quite a bit in CG animation and 2D animation, and there's a lot of planning that has to go involved, but also there's a bit of discovery in the making of the film.
Right.
How much of what ended up being the final product was, like ideas like that, I imagine you guys came up with as you guys were conceiving the film, but what were the things that you also discovered through working with these other artists that maybe weren't always the intent for the film as you guys intended it?
Well, I think with stop motion, sometimes you work yourself into a corner and you need to figure out a gesture or a movement to just get yourself out of a problem. So if you remember, there's a scene where the character is walking down the exterior of a Brooklyn apartment building, and his luggage gets stuck on one of the stairs.
Oh, yeah,
and he just yanks it down. And that was because we realized that the luggage wasn't tall enough, or the stairs were too tall for the luggage to go down in like a smooth way. So he had worked himself into that corner, and the talented animator Eric figured out that small little detail, which is actually one of my favorite acting moments in the whole film, to kind of get himself out of that problem. So those type of little things are discovered along the way. But the big things Rue and I planned from the beginning.
Yeah, we're pretty uptight people, so our animatics are pretty
Very detailed,
precise. The
Right.
timing is almost exactly the same.
Right.
Wow.
And because the poem is so short, it's only 150 words. We felt that we could bring something to it. So the moments that you mentioned, where the characters going underwater or the waves that are coming up on the shore, those were the type of visual metaphors that we felt we could bring to the poem that wasn't in the text itself.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant. It's so brilliant. It's so good.
So amazing. Well, obviously this film is getting a lot of attention. First it started at Annecy, winning a big award there, and then recently Animundi, you guys got a Grand Prix. Congratulations, first of all,
Thank
totally
you.
Thank you.
Thank
deserving
you.
and super exciting. And yeah, like, what's the plan? Like, are you guys gonna continue to kind of go around, show this around festivals? And is there like an actual distribution that's already decided, or what's the plan with this film moving forward?
I don't. Well, we're working with Sev Films, which is our distributor in France, and they have been really awesome submitting to festivals, way more than I could have done myself. So we're at the first 6 months of the festival, so we'll have another a year and a half, I assume, and then after that, I don't know what the plan is.
Right. And I don't know if we mentioned before that this film is actually not a Tiny Inventions production. It's a production of a.k.a. Films, Nydia and Edwina, and they're based in France. So I should have mentioned that earlier, but that's
Yeah,
a
that's
distinction that we
true,
want to
yeah.
make.
Totally, yeah, but definitely like you guys. The Tiny Inventions is also the name for both of you, and you guys are the creators, creative leads of this project. Yeah, that's really great. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about like what's next. I mean, I think we've seen your shorts and commercials and music videos, and just we just get excited about what you guys would do next. And are you gonna do more shorts, or you guys gonna do a feature, or what's your plan moving forward?
So we have lots of plans because you always have to dream big. So we have been developing several shorts. That's how we usually work. Is we just develop 3 or 4 at the same time and see which one sticks the most. So recently we found the one that we want to move forward. So while we're developing a short, we're also developing a feature film, which
Wow.
is our new genre.
Yeah.
Cool.
Do you want to say what it's about? No.
Yeah, sure. So it's loosely based on my own experience as a 16-year-old moving to the U.S. to attend a private boarding school. And I struggled because I didn't really speak English that time, and it wasn't just about language, but it was also like losing confidence 100% and learning how to rebuild myself and finding where I stand in the world. So that's sort of the main theme.
Wow,
That's so
great.
cool. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, when you guys decide on a project like this, I'm just always curious because Dice and I also, similar to you guys, direct together, come up with stories together. But what is that process like for you guys? We're asked this quite a bit, and I apologize for asking this because it's actually not. I know it's not a simple question to answer, but what is your process like this early on a project when it's very deeply, Rue, your personal story? How do you guys work together on something like that?
It's actually it's been a really interesting process because I can only see from my point of view, and then Max chimes in and gives me a different point of view, how like for example, like how Asians are perceived. Like I think there's a tendency that Asians don't really speak their mind and try to be polite, and that's always confusing to others. So things like that, when Max pointed out, like, oh yeah, that's true. Like there's so many things that I do naturally that I don't really realize. So Max's point of view kind of balances out the story and makes me realize what's unique about Asian culture or Japanese culture, or if it's me personally.
Yeah, and for this particular project, because it is Rue's story, she's taken the lead on the writing, but because she's also so close to the material, it is like her feelings and kind of these things from her past. Like I can come in and I can be an objective point of view, and I can also say, okay, maybe that it happened that way, but it would be better if it happened this way, even though it's fictionalized. So it's been a really good back and forth on this project. But every project is unique. Sometimes I'll take the first stab. Sometimes we'll develop it organically at the same time. Each project is sort of its own thing.
And you probably answered this question in other episodes of your podcast, but how do you two work?
It's actually not very dissimilar to what you're describing. A lot of times our stories, even though they're in, similar, they're like in fictionalized worlds that are, animated, maybe animals talking sometimes. But at the root of it is a very personal story or experience usually, and usually that comes from one of us, and
Right.
the other person is usually playing similarly to what Max you're describing, kind of an objective point of view, to make sure that we're balancing that human story that is deeply personal, that makes the story hopefully on some level universal, to make sure that that's always being communicated in a way that can be enjoyed.
Right.
That's kind of it's actually not, yeah, it's pretty similar. It's actually pretty nice to hear you guys talk about it, because I think that's very similar to the way we work together.
Yeah.
And then probably it's similar for you, but it really feels like a conversation between Rue and me. Like she'll do something, I'll respond with some edits or drawings. I'll pass it back to her, and it becomes this ongoing dialogue until it becomes its final form.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually call some of our creative sessions therapy sessions because it's
Awesome.
sometimes
That's
more
so nice.
more often about discussing the real life issues and understanding them before we can use them in the metaphor of the film. So yeah, that's really actually incredible. Do you guys know if the medium, like, are you guys planning? Do you know yet what the aesthetic of the film will be?
We want this to be stop motion. We're not 100% set, and because it's a feature and we'll be dealing with a different type of budget, we're not sure how that would work logistically. But that's where we're set right now.
Yeah, well, the whole feature world seems way different than commercials and shorts, which is the world that we're used to. So we're kind of going in like totally blind, and there's so many questions, and I'm sure I'm going to be asking you guys for advice.
And likewise, we may end up asking you guys for advice.
Yeah.
I mean, one comforting thing that a friend of ours in Hollywood who has a lot more experience dealing with feature films and whatnot said that told us, trying to comfort us, that even Steven Spielberg, who's been making films forever, still getting a film made and is just as challenging as maybe the first film. So that gave us a little bit of comfort that uncomfortable is the kind of status quo a little bit.
It's never easy.
It's
Right.
never
That
makes
easy.
sense, though.
But I honestly, I mean, aside from all that, I feel like, we're super excited. It's really your story. You have no idea, especially, we thought we were remote from Hollywood. You guys are in Baltimore, and you guys are making things that are really touching films and stories. And the fact that, the very basis for your feature film is a personal story is really brave and incredible, just because, to be able to be willing to talk about those things and share those things with the world on a stage of a feature film is just so special, I think, and really inspires us, because sometimes you look out in the world and there's so many different stories that are being told that are based on different things and oftentimes not personal things, and we just so much believe in telling the stories that you're capable of telling, that you've lived. That it's really inspiring to see a studio that we really look to for inspiration is kind of taking that path is awesome. Really, really awesome. So if there's anything we can do, let us know, because I feel like we're on the same path.
Oh, thank you. Well, you offered, so we're definitely
take you
gonna,
up on
yeah.
Yeah, I think if there's a way for us to collaborate one of those days,
Yes.
I think it would be so amazing, because I feel like we share not only the approach, I think just the taste wise, we just love what you guys do, and I think there is so much we can learn from working with you guys. If there's anything we can do together, that's definitely something I would like to push. While you guys are really busy, I know we have our own projects, but yeah, let's keep talking, because we really feel like we've known you guys for a while, even though this is really the first time we talked in person.
Well, let's do it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, we have to come up with a plan.
Yeah.
But I think that, like you said, we could learn a lot from you, and likewise you could learn from us. So I think there's such a healthy thing about collaborating with people that you respect, and just it pushes you. So we would love to collaborate with you.
I also feel like, I mean, you two are obviously super talented in just many, many ways, and I love, love, love your work. But another thing I really admire about you is your branding technique.
Oh.
You're so good at promotion, and like Tonko House has such a unique brand, and you're so good at pushing that. And I always look at Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. I'm like, wow, how do they do this? It's so amazing.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
But,
yeah, we're learning that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for us, it's being at a place. We came from Pixar, this big place that we felt so pampered there and well taken care of, and stepping out on our own was pretty scary, and that's why talking with studios that have grown from the ground up and really grown out of passion like Tiny Inventions is inspiring to us, is because we actually don't know that anything we're doing is correct. We just are kind of terrified to fail, to be honest. And I think a lot of the social media I gotta say Dice does, and puts a lot of time and effort into it, and and we just realized coming from a place like Pixar, who has incredible resources and uses them to put their characters and their worlds all over the place, that we just had to take a different approach. And our approach has actually been much more inspired by some Japanese companies like Itoi-san's company,
Hobonichi.
that are much more of a grassroots effort rather than just quantity and resources poured out. So we're trying to figure out what for us, we've always thought of ourselves, tried to brand ourselves more as a lifestyle than an actual film studio. And
Yeah, lifestyle.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly the word. Just like the way you decorate the studio with like the drifted wood panels and the chalkboard and the aprons, it's like you did a really wonderful job separating from Pixar for sure. It really you really promote like the handmade lifestyle. Yeah.
It's great, yeah, and even in that regards, if there's anything we can collaborate on, not, obviously doing some film project is probably the best way, but in that, through that process, maybe we can kind of do the kind of combo, kind of a branding together. Like, I think there's so much similarities in terms of what you guys like and what we like, and I think let's plan on something. Let's do something together in the near future.
Definitely.
Awesome.
Great. Guys, really thank you so much for your time and really wonderful stories, and we're really rooting for your film to go farther, as far as it deserves, and I know award season's coming and you guys will definitely do as well as it has been doing, and yeah, we're definitely rooting for you guys.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
guys. And thanks for having us on the program.
Thank you.